Nice.
Yeah,
Wow. So they're not rushing, they're speeding up on purpose, kind of launching to the end of the song,
I
huh?
think so. Yeah, yeah.
Because at first I was struck by that's like the classic tempo that so much of this music's played at, right? It's that comfortable play. I don't know how I don't know how you guys play a whole night of music at that tempo. Doesn't your hand hurt?
Well, you mix it up with a few slow songs. Yeah. Uh,
I mean, I guess the same could be said for what I do when we're playing fast bebop and fast free
yeah.
jazz.
Or sometimes I watch you play that upright bass and go, "Oh man, that would
I
my
know.
hands would last about 10 seconds doing that."
What I know, it's true. I have an unusual ability to for enduring the pain of it all. I remember one time I finished a gig, or it was a festival, free jazz festival in New York, and the great William Parker came up to me after my set, and he didn't say a single word to me. He just looked at me in the face, and he put out his hands, like, put your hands in my hands. So I did, and he just held them for a second. He looked at my hands. He kind of touched them with his thumb. He looked me in the face, and he just walked away.
I guess that's a compliment.
Oh, that was the highest compliment I could ever get. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so there's Tim O'Brien, and one of the things interesting about his singing, we'll talk about just briefly, is he has this incredible ability to get a different kind of tone to match the song. I've heard him sing in so many different ways,
Oh,
and
really? On that track, I was struck that he has the old. He's got the old soul, the old sound, the old high lonesome sound in his voice.
which he can do great, and but
Mm.
he chose a kind of a penetrating, kind of narrow tone to his voice there, and I think again probably to also shift it away from the versions we're used to hearing.
Well, and also it's a murder ballad, so murder ballads really should be sung, I think, in the older style, since that's kind of where they come from,
Yeah,
right?
but then of course they're riffing on the Jimi Hendrix version,
Yeah, the chromatic thing.
and
Yeah.
then when he takes that mandolin break. He always has a kind of a modern approach. It's bluegrass, it's traditional, but he's throwing in little riffs and structures that are almost more jazzy than bluegrassy.
Well, isn't that what the original mix was, anyways? Right? It's these guys were getting exposed to Django Reinhardt.
Brian Sutton, who's the king of the bluegrass guitar at the moment, he wanted to be a jazz musician originally. It was like planning to go to Berkeley School of Music, all that stuff.
And play boring jazz guitar.
Started making too much money, doing recordings,
Slumming down in Nashville. Okay,
and then
sure.
never got there. And Tim O'Brien, similar story. Originally, he wanted to be jazz guitar or some kind of jazz player, and then, but he's from West Virginia originally, and kind of grew up around the music.
Yeah, it's you can hear it in his voice. You got to be from that to really catch that. You can't just do it because you like it.
Yeah,
That's a kind of a sourced thing. What do you said he plays bouzouki too? Isn't that a Turkish
well,
instrument?
the bouzouki is really just an octave mandolin.
Oh,
I mean, and so it's an octave lower.
is it a Greek? Does it come from Greece?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, and it's more
Ah.
common in Irish music,
Oh, really?
and that's where Tim O'Brien gets it from. And but he has a very cool custom made one that is like a hollow body guitar with the F holes, and he kind of he doesn't string it just purely with the doubled strings. He does a little bit of that 12 string octave thing, as I recall. I got to play it one time. I got to meet Tim and
Mm.
got to hold and play that octave mandolin. And
Does he do crossover Irish session stuff?
yes,
Ah.
we'll hear cuts from some of that stuff down the line. And also a BBC series called the Transatlantic Sessions, where they get the best, from the States bluegrass players together with the great Irish players.
Right. It's a no-brainer, right? Since the music all comes from the same place.
I highly recommend anyone who's interested in that kind of music to check it out. It's a wonderful series, and there's some incredible. It's beautifully filmed, and they get Ali Bain, who's one of the great
Nice.
fiddlers of all time. I got to jam with him once. Incredible musician, and those are all really great to check out. So as we move along here,
Got to keep the show going.
yeah, we got to move on. And enough of that. We've had too much of this country picking stuff. We got to get
Well,
back to some.
that is your favorite thing, so that's okay.
Well, one of the things in looking at where can we find great singers who also play, there are a couple of genres that this has been more connected to the tradition than rock and roll, for example, and that is bluegrass, country, and blues. And we have a whole other show of blues. It's a lot of blues singers because
Yeah.
I realize that the blues, the guitar player who sings, that really comes from blues.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the iconic image of a rock and roll.
Which comes from the blues.
To the blues. So that was easy finding, we got our pick of 20 different blues guys, 50
Yeah,
different blues guys.
absolutely.
And so into country and bluegrass, again, coming out of the blues tradition and all that, and Irish tradition, right? Great Irish singing. And then the church, right? It's that gospel thing that both blacks and whites, are connected in the South.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you want to find a track of Aretha Franklin because she's going to be a fantastic pianist, especially accompany herself in gospel and everything. But you're not going to be able to find her really ripping on the piano,
Yeah,
right? Also, it's a prerequisite for being noticed. Like, if a person doesn't sing and is a great blues guitarist, well, they don't sing,
right.
so they don't become a household
Yeah, they
name.
don't become an icon. Yeah. So speaking of icons, our next singer is a guy named Sting. And Sting started his career playing jazz and playing around in the clubs as a guitarist and bassist in England, in London. And the drummer, Stuart Copeland, had this band he was putting together called The Police, and they needed a lead singer. And I read one description where they said that he went to check out Sting and perform and said that he barely noticed the singing because he was so amazed by his bass playing. And I think in a lot of the Police recordings, I remember the first time I heard the Police, and I was kind of a jazz snob at the time and not listening to a lot of rock and roll. And then this kind of punk new wave thing, there started to be some interesting bands, and my girlfriend, who was deep into this kind of music, would bring these records home. And occasionally one would grab my ear, and I remember the first cut off of this, what was the name of the album? The Ghost and the Machine, or whatever, the Police album, right? And off that first cut, I heard the bass. It wasn't electric.
Yeah. Yeah. Real deep tone. And it sounds backwards. That's the first thing you notice because the drums come in first and then the bass is reggae style, which you don't play on the one, but then it's like listening to fast jazz. You can't tell where the one is. And then the bass is backwards. And then when the singing comes in and finally they get to the chorus, you're like, oh, there's the downbeat. And you had no idea for all
Yeah.
this time. I still hear it backwards after all these
Right?
years.
Yeah, and yeah, I think
Very cool.
meeting of the spirits, or no, that's a Mahavishnu song. What's the name of this song? Anyway,
Oh, Spirit in the Material World.
yeah, we're spirits, and it's bum 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 bum, and it's
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. It
yeah,
sounds backwards.
and it's a kind
It's
of
great.
tricky riff.
And now, he's a great singer because it's very high and very clear. Also a great songwriter. Those are great songs. And then the way the parts are put together, and it's just a trio. A lot of times trios sound a little bit thin, and sometimes the transparency can be a problem in the music. Not with this band. Actually it works to everybody's
Yeah,
advantage. And I don't know if you would call him a virtuoso bass player or guitarist. That's not a word that I would apply to him, but he's a virtuoso in writing killer bass lines that grab you just as much as his singing and songwriting grab you, and it sort of all goes together. So there's virtuosity to be had there,
yeah,
huh?
and the rare triple threat is the great songwriter who is a great singer and a great instrumentalist who can put all three of those together. The cut again, it was like, yeah, let's find something where we get to see kind of his chops. And again, challenging to find other than go listen to every little thing she does is magic and just listen to the bass line. And you get an appreciation of what an incredible bass player is. Yeah. But I chose something off a live performance from kind of later in their thing, or maybe after they'd reunited, and it's a couple of songs that were a little more oriented towards the instrumental thing.
With his bass playing with Stuart Copeland, they were able to right away early on, and that was kind of their signature. They could really create a lot of energy, even though they're playing the same backbeat parts as anybody else, and he's probably playing the same eighth note pattern on the bass as anybody else. There was an excitement. There was something, an intangible that they're bringing to it, right?
Yeah, and also when I first heard that Police album, I thought, Stuart Copeland's drumming was sounded very original.
Yeah.
He was using that reggae stuff, but the way he was hitting the drums and the way he was creating those beats was just kind of unlike anything I'd heard before.
Well, he talks about it when you check into him. He talks about it pretty clearly. He's doing it quite consciously. What he's doing is he's playing a teeny bit on top of the beat on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So usually the backbeat is something that you want to lay back into. Cha, cha, cha. You give it that extra gravity. He's playing cha, cha, cha. So he's jumping on it all the time.
Yeah, and then Andy Summers, kind of approach also to the guitar was a little different. He's playing these kind of expanded, complicated arpeggios.
Yeah, well, the signature, the Police signature guitar thing is ninth chords. So not James Brown ninth chords, but 1, 5, 9. So stacked fifths. Mm. And then with the chorus, you put the '80s chorus all over it, and you play the stacked fifths, moving them around, and that's sort of one of the songwriting harmonic techniques at the band's signature.
Cool.